Hello and welcome back to Jack Knives Reviews. I'm of course your host, Jack Knives. And welcome back to Game Month. We've only got 2 more reviews before Jackoween begins. Let's take one last dip in our history of gaming with Tetris.
Guys are the kings of cliffhangers.
Businessman Hank Rogers is trying to acquire the rights to a game based out of Russia. In order to secure the rights on behalf of Nintendo, he has to illegally go into Soviet Russia, meet and deal with not only swindling businessmen and con artists, but the government itself. All for a new game called Tetris to be a part of the first handheld video game system called the Game Boy.
I knew some elements of the story of Tetris because it is a fascinating story. One video game kind of defied a empire, pretty much is what happened. And yes, I'm sure some elements were very, 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 very heavily exaggerated, but it just had this really fun feel to the movie. It just felt like, what if a spy thriller where every spy thriller has a kind of idol or a thing that the bad guys want and the good guys have to save and preserve. And if that was Tetris, which is pretty much what it was. And it's cool to see like how in the details it worked. Concept prototype of the Game Boy. So many things about this movie. I loved it because like you could tell they had a lot of budget to it. They had a lot of real artists. The way they set it up was like the budget was used in the right spots, the filming was done in the right way, the acting was really, really well done. Taron Egerton was just this really charismatic but believably charismatic character of Hank Rogers, who was a real person, and I think he's still alive actually. But it was really cool to see this kind of story of a guy who really, he had to make like ultimate gamble after gamble after gamble just to not only provide for his family, but to do something that kind of benefited everybody. It was really interesting to see like layers didn't feel forced. It didn't feel like the narrative detracted. It felt like it took like smooth intersections but stayed on the course as far as a story narrative was. It implied it wasn't just like the USSR themselves, but more of like a high-ranking officer who was trying to benefit from it and try to seize power through like greed and all of this stuff. Was like, it was kind of interesting also to see Gorbachev, who was a notorious bastard, kind of get a he got a good adaptation for him. But it was fun because just the way they did this movie was very, very, it felt like everything mattered, like everything about this. But then you stop and think, I'm like, this is all of a video game, but they're taking it so real. I mean, because it is real. I mean, it is legitimately more of, they even point out it's not necessarily that it was because of a video game, it was because it was a thing that was an individual's ownership. And they couldn't have that in a sustainable, severe communist Russia because everything was owned by the government. Everything. And you couldn't do, say, act, however, without the government's okay. And you had Hank Rogers, who was married to a Japanese woman who lived in Japan, who didn't speak Japanese, coming to Russia to try to tell them how business worked. It was just like the balls on this dude must have been massive, because that is like, wow. It did keep me invested the entire movie. It didn't feel like it dragged too much, and I loved that because getting to see that kind of humanity in these kind of stories, especially if they're, biopics, they really do need to focus more on that, which this one did a good job at it. And yeah, it was kind of, I'm sure, very heavily exaggerated, the severity of everything. But it was really interesting to see, and it's a pretty fun movie. Like, it's actually a pretty well-made, fun movie that I could see a lot of adults really enjoying just on its own. But then you sit and think, and like, throughout the whole movie, just remember, all of this was over Tetris. Everyone loves Tetris. I give Tetris 4.5 out of 5. Have you seen Tetris? Let me know in the comments down below. We have one more review for Game Month, so come back. Till then, I'll see you next time.